Hello and welcome. My name is Sharon Calhoun, Managing Director of Vector Wealth Management. Joining me today is Tory Schaefer, Senior Director of Yoga at Lifetime. Tory, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited about this topic. And just to kick it off, we're calling it Healthy Living and Wellness in Retirement. So sounds like fun.
It's amazing.
And some of you may be wondering, what does, as I mentioned, Tory's a specialist in yoga, and you may be wondering, what does yoga have to do with retirement or financial planning? Well, let's face it, right? The stock market, it's up, it's down. It's up, it's down. News media, 24/7, right? We can't seem to turn that off. World news, what's going on with inflation? What's going to happen with the presidential election? Those are all kind of financial pieces. But outside of that, it could be something like caring for an aging parent, or perhaps caring for an ill spouse or child. And so the world kind of throws a lot of these stressful things at us, right? So we're putting so much stress and anxiety on ourselves. There's been a lot of news media lately about mental health, and as there should be, right? So there's a lot going on that we're putting on ourselves, and oftentimes we can't do anything about it. And so, Tory, with you joining me today to spend some time together, kind of talking about wellness, particularly as it pertains to yoga, I think is going to be really beneficial for our listeners. So again, thank you for being here. I want to kick it off by just spending a couple minutes. You have a very interesting background. So I'd like you to share just for a few minutes, just sharing with us, how did you get into this position and what's your background?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Yoga is an interesting one because when you go down the rabbit hole of learning about yoga, it really means connection. So connection to everything that you do in life. And my way into yoga was actually via when I was living in New York City as an actor. And I had this coach of Shakespeare coach that would do all these different breathing exercises, and all of a sudden we'd start doing different stretches and movements to ground ourselves for character work. And then lo and behold, she brought me to a yoga class one day, and I was like, that's what we've been doing. And some of the greatest actors out there really start to learn that acting isn't pretending, as many of us think it is. It's actually learning to become as present and as lifelike, living under an imaginary circumstance. And so all of a sudden, I started to see the parallels between what I was doing on stage, trying to be more real, and going to yoga classes, which would then in turn just help me become more present in everyday life. And as I moved back to Minnesota, I started doing more and more yoga, and I started teaching when I was living out in New York a little bit, but really started to make the transition to all the different facets that there are in yoga and how it was helping me. Eventually you go, I can't keep this to myself. It's something that has to be shared. Mm-hmm. And so I started teaching a lot and became a manager at a couple different boutiques in the Minneapolis area. And pretty soon Lifetime started getting their yoga program going, and they came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, why don't you come over here and help us get it going over here? And it's been a wonderful ride at Lifetime for the past 15 years.
Wow, that's awesome. One thing I want to just go back to what you said, I think is really important, is you said kind of living in the present, right? Mm. We see that a lot. I see that a lot as an advisor working with clients, because again, there's always this, right? Tomorrow is unknown to all of us. And clients kind of get, focused in on, well, here are my assets today, and this fear around tomorrow, or always the what ifs. And so when you just talked about, doing your acting work and then tying that into yoga, trying to be in the present, I think that's a lesson that we can all learn, is let's try to live today in the present. And so with your expertise now with yoga, like, what is yoga? How do you define it? And are there different types of it?
Oof, it's a great question. So yoga, if you really dig in, has been around for thousands and thousands of years. For the majority of that time, it was really about meditation. And many of the old teachers would talk about something they would call dukkha. Dukkha simply means suffering, that life is suffering. Not typically the teaching that you would imagine from a happy community like yogis, but when you start to realize that it's not about suffering, it's about what are the things that cause suffering. And the main teachings go anytime that we attach to something, whether that's worrying about what's about to happen in the future, looking at today, the political state of the state can really cause suffering in our lives if we worry too much about it and attach to it. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't care, but as soon as we can consciously bring ourselves back to a single breath, a single moment, all of a sudden that suffering doesn't have as much control over the reactions of how we live our life. Because when we really start, put it this way, the yoga that we know of mainly today is a physical form. Mm-hmm. That physical form is there to make our bodies feel better, because when our bodies are achy, typically we go into conversations and we're a little bit more sharp with our words. Whereas if our bodies are feeling more free and open, it's easier to be more present and not be as sharp with our words. The same thing is happening with our minds anytime that we are giving into the reactions of what we're worried about in the future or what just happened in the past. So it's all about breathing at the end of the day and going, can I become more present right here, right now?
So again, are there different types of yoga? I mean, when I think of yoga, I think of going to the gym, signing up for, jumping into the 6 p.m. yoga class. And I may do it, for a couple of weeks, and then I don't do it for a couple of weeks. But are there different types of yoga? And how would a person know what type of yoga might be right for them?
It's a great question. There are literally hundreds of different styles. So the first thing is just to begin, to try something on. Well, as a matter of fact, right now, even all the listeners, the viewers, unless you're driving, don't do this, but you could close your eyes. Just close your eyes right now and just take a breath in and just notice the temperature, the texture, and then exhale, watch it go away. And then you might start to expand on that breath, making it a little bit deeper on the inhale, pausing at the top, and then exhaling, letting it go. And then do it just one more time. Take a deep breath in, little pause, and then you exhale, let it go. And typically within 3 breaths, anybody that just tried that on just did a style of yoga. It's anything that's going to help us become more present. Some people find those meditative states doing a marathon or running. All of these can be considered yoga as soon as it becomes a mindful activity, that I'm trying to become more aware and more present. Now, physical forms, absolutely. You'll see on schedules something called hatha, Hatha. Literally means any physical form of yoga, but typically when you go take a class that's called hatha, it's going to be a slower practice. It's really going to focus on dynamic engagements of the body to help create more stability in our joints. Another popular style that you'll see is vinyasa, and that's moving pretty swiftly, one breath, one movement, almost becomes a dance. So it's where your breath and your bodily sensations become such a primary point of focus that everything else kind of fades away, and all of a sudden you find that state of flow, that state of being in the moment. And then one since the pandemic that is really interesting to see bubbling to the top of popularity, which is always an interesting thing to say when you're talking about yoga popularity, is yin. And yin, in an hour class, you'll get through maybe 5 or 6 poses. And it's really about laying in passive shapes, which will physically help really get beyond the muscular fibers of the body and move more into like the fascia tissues, the gray matter, which helps create greater mobility. But I think the interesting thing since the pandemic is that it's really like the gateway to meditation. It is such a mindful practice because you're sitting in a pose for 5-6 minutes that is not comfortable. It's not one of those where you have a bunch of pillows underneath you. It's really taxing the reactions of the mind. And the more that you come back to your breath, all of a sudden you leave your yoga mat, and those things that often spark reactions in your life don't have as much power over you. So, to answer your question in not such a long way, there's a lot of styles out there. If you can find your breath, you can do yoga. And then it's just up to your personality to go, do I want to move fast? Do I want to move slow? There is a style out there for you. Even if you're at home, you can pull up so many different things on YouTube now that will get you started in the right way.
So that's a really good point when you just said if you're at home. So what I'm hearing you say is you don't have to belong to a gym membership or a club membership to practice yoga. So you don't have to worry about getting in the car, driving someone, being to a class on time, maybe feeling uncomfortable in a class where you maybe don't know exactly what you're doing compared to others. So doing it in the privacy of your own home sounds like a very viable option for many people that haven't ventured into this as of yet.
Yeah, it's an easy way to start. Even Lifetime. Lifetime has a free app that you could download, and we have hundreds of yoga classes on there, as well as different types of meditation. I think the accessibility of doing it at home is a romantic notion. Live classes are there for a reason. There's a sense of accountability. And once you get past the nervousness, because we always say that even at Lifetime, within the big building that's there, the yoga doors are usually probably the scariest doors for most people for the first time to go through. But once you do, it's one of the most impactful doors that you can go through, because you really get the opportunity to learn about yourself and how you show up every day. You become a better listener. You become more in tune with what you're putting into your body as far as nutrition. And then all of a sudden, when it does come back to, hey, I need to financially plan for the future, I need to do things to make sure that I'm set up for myself, for my family, it's not so much coming from a place of reactive fear, because that's the one thing. Fear is that big one that is going to always put up a roadblock from wanting to start, right? And that's the same thing with yoga. You can almost find a parallel between finances and getting started with a yoga practice. It's that first step in through the door that's going to be, I don't want to. The reactions of your mind going, I'm going to look silly, I'm going to look foolish. With finances, I mean, my financial background is a roller coaster ride as an actor and then being a person just doing yoga classes. And I remember always being so frustrated and fearful of saving because I just didn't feel like I had the tools to do it. But as soon as I got over the reaction and I could just go, it's just a practice. It's a ritual that I need to put into my daily life so that it's not this big giant to-do that's out there in the future that's a giant cloud looming over me. It's just a small little practice that is, if you implement it on a daily basis, it becomes just part of how you live your life. And then all of a sudden it's not as scary. And so, yes, I feel like I'm just talking around everything that we're going at, but really starting a yoga practice, you can do it at home. There's lots of different things that you can look up online, different apps that you can do for free. They're going to get you started. So hopefully that takes away a little bit of the fear so that if you do want to be part of a bigger community, because that's the other thing that's beautiful about a yoga practice, is you get to meet a lot of like-minded individuals that just kind of help you find that state of joy in simply being.
Mm-hmm. So I just love this because, again, to a person that knows very little about yoga, to me it just seems very simple. I go to class, I do this for 45 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever it is, and then I pack up my stuff and go home. But listening to you talk more about the intention, being present, starting, and again, in my head, because the world that I live in is finance, right? I'm very passionate about, IRS tax code and saving for retirement, estate planning, and making sure that we have legacy planning. But I feel like there's a lot of similarities. And what I'm hearing you say is there has to be a start, right? We have to start. And that is so true for what I try to tell our clients as well about with this whole financial picture. We just have to start somewhere, and we just take it one step at a time. But I'm going to keep going back to one, just living in the present, and 2, starting. So I just love that. Talk to me a little bit about some of the benefits of yoga. So besides being intentional, being present, what can it do for those individuals that are really stressed out about everything that's going on, or they have anxiety about things that have yet to happen or are unknown to even happen? What can yoga do to help individuals with that wellness piece?
Easiest answer, everything. It's everything. I mean, all you need to do is, right now as an exercise, is think about something that stresses you out in life. And all of a sudden your mind will start to tell you a bigger story about it. And pretty soon that story isn't even something that's just talking to you. You'll start interacting with it, right? You'll start talking with yourself about why that's such a stressful thing. And pretty soon you start to feel your shoulders, creep up, and your heart rate starts to accelerate. Yoga is going to play with all of these different things. It's going to help you become, let me be clear, it never gets rid of the stress. That's when we go to the grave. That's when stress finally leaves you. I always love it during New Year's when people go, "Why are you doing yoga?" "Oh, I want to get rid of stress in my life." No, we need some stress. That keeps us alive. But it's going to help you recognize the story that's happening a lot more quickly. And all of a sudden, once you can recognize that there's a story happening, I can find my breath. As soon as you can find your breath, all of a sudden you can slow down your nervous system, your heart rate, the respiratory system. And then when you're doing the physical practice, it's taking the breath and it's actually moving the different types of energy through the body, the nutrients, the oxygen, and actually helping to open up the pathways that they move through so that when you are stressed, it's not such a fight or flight response, but you can go, "I'm okay." And as soon as you can say, "I'm okay," the blood just naturally starts to flow a little bit easier. Your heart rate calms down, and you go, "I can look at this and have a conversation rather than reacting and fighting with it." Mm-hmm. And so, in my opinion, that's one of the best things that yoga does for you, is it helps you go from a place of complete fight or flight reaction to a state of going, I can deal with anything that comes up in my life. It's not all going to be roses and rainbows. I wish it were, maybe, I don't know. But when they do slap you in the face, and life is going to slap you in the face,
Yeah.
you can sit back and go, well, how are we going to deal with this? Let's have conversations. Let's find the people that can support me, whether it's with my finances or if I'm struggling with a parent that's aging. How can I connect with the community around me to make sure that everybody's supported in the best way possible?
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. For individuals that maybe have been practicing yoga, or they are, more familiar with it than I am, certainly, because maybe, again, they've been going to a class for a period of time. Is there anything new or anything that you could tell those listeners that might be hearing this saying, "Oh, I already go to the 6:00 yoga class twice a week"? Anything you could pass on to them?
Well, if it's twice a week, let's make it 5 times a week.
Really?
Yeah, eventually 6-7 days.
Really?
Like I said, yoga can be anything from just taking a few minutes to breathe. Then there's the physical aspect. You could even consider a cold shower yoga, anything that's going to make you more present. But I think the thing that happens to people that have been practicing yoga longer, and it's true with anybody that's been doing anything in a ritualistic way for a long time, is it becomes a habit. And so I would say the thing that somebody's been practicing for a long time could really start to implement is try something new, because we get so comfortable with what we know that all of a sudden we almost start attaching to that, which can cause its own type of suffering. Our yoga practice can actually become an addiction. And so changing it up and going, well, I've never tried that style, and there's literally hundreds of different styles. The beauty of yoga is it has paralleled the evolution of life. And so it seems as life has gotten more chaotic and busy, there's different styles of yoga that also kind of mirror that, because the more you can mirror something in an environment where you're safe and you're practicing mindfulness, you can be more prepared to take that off the mat than into your life. So change it up. Change up the routine. Try something that perhaps you went, oh, no, I don't want to do that. It's like somebody that starts meditating. You go, yeah, 10 minutes. I can do 10 minutes. Eventually you want to go, all right, it's time to step it up, 20. After 20, then a few months, and it's like, well, you know what, an hour. Let's try an hour. And pretty soon after you've been meditating for a long time, eventually you go, wow, an hour is actually not that bad. I should sit for 2 hours because that's really going to stir some things up. And the more that we can mindfully stir things up and be able to practice coming back to the moment, the more adaptable, the more flexible we are for whatever life has to give us.
So what's the difference between yoga and meditation?
They're the same.
They're the same.
It depends on the individual and what practice they're looking for. So again, yoga, if you loosely or roughly define it, means connection. It means relationship. So if you're being mindful to how you're eating food, you could almost call that a yoga practice. Meditation is the original yoga practice. That's what most people practiced up until about 150 years ago. When this physical form of what we call asana, those are the poses that you do, started to become more popular. In my opinion, that became popular because life became a little bit crazier. And so the poses actually became this tool that people could use to stress their body, which helped them go, yep, when I'm dealing with stress, it becomes a mirror so I can see where my reactions go and I become more present. Not only that, if my body is more limber and open, I can actually sit and meditate for longer.
Because again, we could probably talk on this for, easily an hour, but what would be some takeaways that you could think of that we could share with our audience today?
What is the saying? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. It's just begin. Whether you are looking to deal with the stress in your life, it starts with a single breath. Go find a meditation app or something that just helps you breathe. And if you find after 3 breaths, because really in 3 breaths, you usually can feel a little bit more calmed down, then you look at your life and go, what else do I want to implement? Is my body creating more reactions in my life? Then maybe you need to get into a physical yoga class because that's going to help untie where you're feeling tight and stressed out. And then when that happens, all of a sudden the choices that we need to make in life, whether it's planning for the future financially or wherever you want to go, is a lot easier to, once again, take a step towards. They're all about little rituals in your life. I know for me, if I don't wake up in the morning and meditate and then do some sort of physical yoga practice, I've added in now a cold shower every morning because that helps me become more present and less reactive because I don't like cold things. And then I play with music because music brings me joy and it helps me connect to a moment. You find those little things and you make it a ritual every day. And then all of a sudden, the other things that also need to be rituals to help us plan and be prepared for the future aren't as daunting.
So do you feel that in your experience, having done this for many years, that you've kind of retrained yourself to say, okay, I know this much stress is good, but the rest of it, I don't deal with anymore because I have an outlet for that?
Ooh, it's a big one. I would say every day is a new journey. I don't think, for me personally anyway, there aren't stresses that are still going to surprise me, that are going to whap me on the side of the head and I go, oh, crap. Something goes a little awry and I lose my temper. I have not found that place where I am enlightened and floating around the room and levitating. Life is life. And I think what happens, though, is that the more I have my rituals every day that help prepare me for the things that are going to surprise me, I'm not as taken off guard and I can make better choices for my life and for the community and my family, which is huge.
Again, one thing that comes to mind as I, just think about the clients that I work with, and again, the stress and anxiety and trying to be in the present is, I'll often tell our clients, you've hired us for a reason, and that reason is to try to take that stress and worry off of you and put it on us. And so where we try to play that role is, please don't worry, let us do that piece for you. And the worry that we're doing is the analysis, the research, the execution, all of that. And what we want you to do, client, is do what you're talking about right now, Tory, which is living in the present, taking that breath right now and having control over that piece. And to me, I just think that is something that is priceless. And I wish we could get this out there to more people to say, let's start doing that today. And what I also heard you say, and I love this, because in my mind, as someone that doesn't know a lot about this, I think, well, yoga is, I have to go to class for 45 or 60 minutes, whatever the class time is. But what you said was, it doesn't have to be that, right? It can be 5 minutes. It can be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Right? It can be any variation of that.
Set yourself up for success. Do what works for your life.
Yeah. So if you truly are newbie and you've never done this, maybe your health isn't the greatest. Maybe you're the age on your birth certificate's showing you to be in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I'm hearing you say you can still do this. You don't have to get in the car, drive to Lifetime. You can do this at home. You can do this.
Do it right now in the chair. Yep. There's so much you can do. Yeah. It's just making the time to do it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So last parting, again, if you could, again, talk to our listeners for some words of wisdom as we start to wrap up, what would that be?
Become aware of what stresses you out. It's okay to face the things that cause discomfort in our lives. It's when you allow them to become the primary story in the mind that we start to go down a rabbit hole that's going to cause more angst and suffering. But as soon as you're willing to take a look at it and just say hi, take a breath, you can reach out to the people that can support you. I think money is probably one of the most stressful things that people deal with in their life. I think from now on, you should start all of your sessions off with your clients with a meditation.
I love that.
Just go, hey, before we talk, let's take 10 breaths. That's it, 10 breaths. And just we can have an honest conversation about this, see how we can support each other. And that's for anybody out there. It's amazing the power that 3 breaths can have. And again, it's not that the 3 breaths are going to magically wave a wand over your stress and send it away, but hopefully it'll ground you in what is real. Because oftentimes the stories in our mind aren't. They're just amplifications of the fear and stress we have about what could be. So bring it back to right now. You're breathing, you're alive, and that's a beautiful gift.
Mm-hmm. I think that is fantastic. I love that. And that was a fantastic summary. Tory, you have been such a delightful guest today.
Thank you.
This has been just a real treat for me to share this with our audience, but I got to learn along the way as well. And I'm just listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, I want to make a commitment to starting this, today, because it's easy, right? It's easy to start. We just have to make that commitment to go ahead and start. I just want to ask you, because you've been so wonderful and so interesting, if our audience, if they did want to reach out to you to learn more about this, how do they find you?
Sure. It's funny, social media. It seems like the opposite of yoga, but that's how we connect in a fun way. You can find me on the Book of Face, or Facebook as some people know it, at Toryland Yoga. That's Toryland Yoga. I believe that everybody can experience their own wonderland in this life. It's just a matter of breathing and jumping down the right rabbit hole.
I agree completely. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, it's been such a fantastic and discovery conversation. So thank you. If you like this episode, please feel free to send it on to someone that you think could benefit from hearing this information. As well as if you know someone that you think could benefit from our services, please feel free to send them our way as well. We are always grateful for referrals and the opportunity to serve others.
Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Be sure to consult first with a qualified financial advisor and/or a tax professional before implementing any investment strategy.